Okay. So I'll tell you what I have in mind on that data, but I will not present a concrete analysis, primarily because I have only worked out a part of it. The other part I am still exploring. And moreover, even the part that I have worked out, I haven't checked. When usually what you do is you work out something and check with your teachers, and then you present that analysis. So I haven't done that part, checking with my teachers part. So I will not really present that without doing that. But I'll definitely tell you what I have in my mind. And also you can look at, I mean, since there are Bangla speakers and also Ishani is Assamese speaker. So you will, I think, you'll like to see the data, and maybe you'll have some thoughts on them that might help me. Okay. Let me start with the handout. Okay. So yeah, so today I will discuss intralinguistic variation, right? So that is, what is the difference, what kind of distributional or interpretational difference we see in a language within the various forms of distributive numerals, and what can we make out of it? Okay. So how to make sense of it? Okay. So, just to remind you, we saw three kinds of forms for Bangla reduplicated in one. So duto, duto. And two forms suffixed with kore. So duto kore as in two. And three reduplicated and suffixed. So duto, duto kore. Okay. So basically I can tell you in advance that the difference is between 1 versus 2 and 3, that is the reduplicated form and the form suffixed with kore. Okay. So what I found over the years, people telling me, is that the distributive numerals, the reduplicated numerals can only yield, are only good with participant distributive readings, whereas the kore suffix numerals are the major form for distributive numerals, and they are productive and they can do all sorts of things. Okay. Right. And even personally also, I feel that I hardly use the reduplicated numerals, just the forms that are just reduplicated as distributive numerals. It's kind of not a strategy I use. So but this, whatever I'm representing here, is not exactly, not only, or not, does not represent my own judgment. This is something I found after talking to at least 7-8 people, all of whom are speakers of Kolkata Bangla, and studied in Bangla medium school, regularly reads Bangla. So people whose judgment I trust. So okay, so let us see some examples. So 4, Mera duto duto boi poreche. Cool. The girls have read 2 books each, right? So each of the girls have read 2 books. Okay. However, B and C are found to be not so great. Okay. So which means that, so let's read them out. Robi proti ghantaয় duto duto oshud খায়. Or so this is not found to be a great usage of the distributive numeral, right? people categorically have told me, no, this should be duto kore oshu. Okay. And similarly, রবি সোমবার মঙ্গলবার আর বুধবারে দুটো ফল কিনেছিল. Again, people do not exactly like duto to use the reduplicated form here. So can you see my handout?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because it's just now it showed me participants are able to see your handout now or your file now. Okay, so I was confused. Okay. So yeah, so people do not like B and C as they would like them with the core forms. Okay, but they are cool with 4A, the participant distributed. So you can see the contrast between 5B and C and 4B and C. So Robi প্রতি ঘন্টায় দুটো করে or দুটো করে ওষুধ খায়, no problem, even for me, of course. And Robi সোমবার মঙ্গলবার, so I should read the translation probably. Robi takes 2 medicines per hour or in each hour. That's what the B sentences mean. And Robi সোমবার মঙ্গলবার আর বুধবারে দুটো করে or দুটো করে ফল কিনেছিল, which is good. On each of Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, Robi had bought 2 fruits. Okay. So, and what they don't like is duto. Okay. And interestingly enough, somewhat similar observations have been made by Soumya Palur on Malayalam about the distinction between the reduplicated numerals and the distributive numerals form with Vedam. Okay. So yeah, I thought I would type out the data, but I really was not able to. So I'd encourage you to actually see the relevant portions in our thesis. Okay, I'll give you the exact section also if you want. So basically what Palu discusses is reduplicated numerals are bad with occasion distributive readings, whereas the forms with Vedam in Malayalam, so Vedam follows the number, noun phrase, numeral indefinite, so number, noun phrase, then Vedam. Okay, so this form actually is very productive and is good with all kinds of distributive readings. And with this form, she also reports to get the Telugu kind of reading, that is out of the blue occasion distributivity also. Whereas she reports with reduplicated numerals, she does not get out of the blue distributivity, occasion distributivity at all. So, and this is actually, when I read her thesis, it was really, I mean, it was astonishing for me because honestly, my work and her work is in parallel. My work is after hers, of course, but I was not even aware of her work. I just became aware of it. I got her thesis like 3 weeks back. So it's amazing that two quite unrelated languages, you see a very similar kind of pattern in terms of how the different forms of numerals are behaving in terms of their interpretation. Okay, so that's why I think it's worth, as I told you on the first day, it's really important to investigate whether you have more than one forms of distributive numerals, one, and two, if there is a distributional difference between these. Okay, in the interpretation, if there's a difference in their compatibility with various kinds of distributive readings. Okay, because it seems like, this, of course, Malayalam and Bangla, so this goes across language families and types of languages, right? And whether it has a classifier or not. So this seems to be a good bit of generalization, typological generalization that needs to be investigated by studying as many languages as possible. Okay. Actually, I was thinking that since I was not able to write down Soumya's data here. So maybe what one of you can do is just present it for the workshop, whatever she has in her thesis on this distinction. That would be a good exercise because we have Bengali participants, and this is a suggestion. You don't have to. Yeah. So let me go into further difference, a little bit of further difference that came up in my investigation. So is that, first of all, let's concentrate on the fact that the cardinality phrases. So remember, from the first day on, I don't have it here, we were discussing that whatever morphology we are seeing applies to the cardinality phrases in Bangla. Okay, the distributive numerals, distributive indefinites are cardinality phrases. The morphology applies to cardinality phrases. Now, there are two kinds of cardinality phrases, right? Not only for Bangla, for all languages. One contains a classifier, the other contains a measure word, right? So either classifier phrases or measure phrases. Measure words are container words like bottle, box, etc. And also the measure words like kilogram and liter, all of those things, inches. Whereas classifiers are particles that are not easily glossable into some content word, right? For example, take Bangla ta, it doesn't have really any meaning out, beyond its grammatical purpose, right? So it doesn't have an individual non-classified existence in the language. Okay. And so that makes a difference, and people have noticed that that is actually a huge difference in the composition of the noun, the cardinality noun phrases in languages. Okay. Now, what I found is that reduplication is compatible with classifiers, but not with measure phrases. Okay. So, however, a suffixing code is compatible with both classifiers and measure phrases. Moreover, this is the cool part, that it makes reduplication, suffixing code makes reduplication available even for the measure phrases. Okay, so what you see in 6, let's look at 6, 7 and 8. So duto bati, okay, so this is two classifier bowl, duto bati, so reduplicating numeral and classifier, cool, and duto kore bati is cool, again, is good too. 7 duto dal, okay. So this is possible here. To is behaving like a measure. Okay, so duto dal is not bad, and duto kore dal is perfect. Interesting facts hold for 8. So dubati dal, 2 bowlfuls of dal. Dubati dal, dubati dal is judged to be bad by speakers. Okay. The moment you tell them a reduplicated measure phrase, invariably I've seen Bangla speakers make a face, like it's this kind of face, like they don't like it. They don't like to hear it. And then they would give you justifications of scenarios where they could use that kind of an expression. But let me tell you, so those are all of those scenarios, mostly are not all of those, but most of those are about not the distributive reduplication, but this emphatic reduplication. So somebody is not able to hear you clearly, so you are repeating dubati dal, so something like that, or you're giving instructions that bring me dubati dal, and they couldn't hear you, and so you say, or you're talking to somebody who's hearing impaired or something like that. So to make, so that's a different kind of reduplication completely. That is not distributive reduplication. That's emphatic reduplication, and we are not. That's not our business in this class. Okay, so it seems that distributive reduplication with measure phrases is bad. Okay, no problem with kore suffixation at all, right? So dubati kore dal is perfect. And people have reported that they like dubati kore dal. Okay, so actually this is very interesting, and it's also very puzzling also that
Yes, which suggests, I mean, that your measure phrase is just not at all the same syntactic construction, right?
yeah, at all, not at all. Yes, absolutely.
I didn't know that you couldn't do 8B, so that's great data.
And also, so this is something that I would like to know if this holds for, let's say, Hindi or Ashomiya,
Same
or
thing.
you know.
So do patili chawal is terrible, but you know, for us we have a really a genuine measure phrase. In the sense nominal in structure, not in classifier. Yeah, 2 cup chawal, 2 cup chawal. We can do 2 cup chawal. But we can't do 2 cup chawal. It doesn't, I mean, it's complete gibberish. Strong ungrammaticality.
Yeah, true. I mean, I think I get the, I have actually lost my judgments over these things. That happens, as you know, but whoever I've asked, the first impression they give me is like, what are you saying? So let's say
actually the difference
chai, du chamuch chini dilam, something like that.
Do bati karke chawal, but I don't know whether it is the same. I don't know whether it has a distributive meaning at all. So.
Oh, so so can you do do bati karke, mane do whatever the measure phrase then karke. So this is something that I would really like to know. What does Hindi
chawal, but that is not distributive at all. And in Hindi, I don't think that the karke can do distributivity
in
general.
Other than acha.
In general, I think, but I'm not sure because I was hoping that there will be a Hindi workshop. And I think intense fatigue is set in. So, but it's a really nice topic to work on actually for Hindi speakers, because now that you
actually, I'm really curious to know what is the parallel scene in Hindi for these, because that is where I can see. So I can tell you what. Okay, so there's a. Let me complete this part so that. Or maybe I can tell you. So I was, since I have some Turkish friends, so I was asking them about these. So their distributive numerals are, if you remember from the first day, so uch is the each actually. Each is the number 3, and then sort of the distributive form is ucher. So adding at. Okay, and then a vowel harmony happens. So ucher, and they can do ucher with measure phrase, measure words also. So they can say ucher, shishe, beer. So 3 sort of equivalent to Bangla teen botol kore beer. Okay, so. And that's puzzling. That was puzzling to for me, because I was expecting that this won't happen. But then the thing that is that they have is that they also have this optional classifier tane. So they can say which tane book. Tane is an optional classifier. And if you want to add a distributive morphology, you'll add it before tane, right? So, so ucher tane book, or ucher shishe bira. Okay. So, oh, I'm sorry, not ucher. Yeah, ucher shishe bira. So the tane and shishe would come in the same place. The measure classifier and the measure phrase, measure word. So I think, yeah, so I think that's telling, though I have not yet been able to understand the Turkish facts very well. So it seems quite different. But so that's why I'm really interested to know about the exact parallel facts from Hindi. So this is really interesting for me, and I'm really curious. So let me tell you what I have in mind. So first of all, as Aisha already said, so the measure phrases and the classifier phrases have been argued to have different compositional structures, and they have different semantics. Okay, so I will not go into the semantics at all, because let me clarify, because there are actually very good papers written on Bangla classifier phrases by Vinita, and also a very nice work by Priyanka Viswas. So I would not present any uncareful position on those works, right? So that's why I'm not going to present the semantics here, because it seems to me that I'll have to take a position on their works here based on my distributivity facts. So I'll first consult with Paul and Roger and Vinita, then present it. So anyway, so the classifier, so look at figure 1. So these are not exactly from, these are roughly the two kinds of structures that you see in figure 1 and figure 2. Okay, so the classifier applies to the noun directly. So see the classifier phrase in figure 1, CL, the classifier head, is composed of the classifier head taking as its complement the noun phrase. So duto boy, so to is taking boy as its complement. Okay, and it semantically works out something. So let me tell you in paraphrase what it does. So in a noun phrase, the notation has singular individuals, plural individuals, all sorts of things, right? So, but when you have to count 2 books, you have to basically pick out 2 instances of singular books, right? So what the classifier does, to in this case, is to, from that jumbled up denotation of noun phrase books, so which is composed of singularities and pluralities, it just picks out the atoms, book atoms, right? So it gives a sort of nicely partitioned denotation from the jumbled up kind or mass kind of denotation from book. Okay, and then the numeral works on the result of the classifier selecting the atoms from the books. Okay, and thus you get the numeral phrase. Okay, and there's some complexity on there too, whether the classifier phrase applies on the numeral or whether the numeral applies on the classifier or not. So there's a debate about that. So I won't go into that, and that's a puzzle in itself. So I can tell you that Vinita goes for the position, that Dayal goes for the position that number selects or takes as argument the classifier phrase following Ionin and Matushansky's proposal. Okay. This is basically summarizing here. The numeral works like a determiner on the classifier, on the noun phrase modified by the classifier. Okay, look at the measure phrase now too. So here the numeral does not directly combine with the noun. Okay, or any form of it, right? So first of all, the numeral must combine with the measure word. Okay, so these are called as measure words, measure classifiers. So I have written, usually people write it as measure phrase in figure 2 instead of classifier phrase. So, but not to confuse too much, I retained it as a classifier phrase and calling it a measure classifier. Okay, so what happens is that the classifier and the measure word forms a phrase, a measure phrase or a measure classifier phrase. And then that measure classifier phrase works as a modifier of the noun, right? So on your left, figure 1, you have a determinal kind of structure. The numeral working on the classifier phrase, which contains the noun phrase. And on your right, you have the measure phrase combined, which is the result of the number and the measure word combining, working as a modifier of the noun. Okay, and thus you form the noun phrase. And you can also see the resulting phrases in the two cases. So one is actually a quantifier phrase, a count phrase, a classifier, a number phrase in this case, but you can project DPs, etc., or QPs on top of it. Whereas in two, you have a noun phrase, right? So this is more or less like an adjectival modification, right? So yeah. So this is the difference between the two structures. So what, of course, I will, and we have seen that reduplication does not go with, reduplication goes with the structure on the left, and measure phrases goes with the structure on the right. What did I say? Reduplication cannot go with the structure on the right, whereas core is compatible with both of these structures. Okay, so my proposal at present for these is that the incompatibility of reduplication with the measure phrases shows that reduplicative numerals do not have the internal structure of the measure phrases. Okay, number one. Okay, so this is okay. It does so. Okay, that's one position, that they do not have this kind of position. Figure 2. The compatibility of measure phrases with core shows that this suffix is compatible with this kind of structure, the modification structure. So let me call it the determiner structure and the modifier structure. Okay, so core is compatible with the modifier structure, so good. Core seems to, that's good. So what my proposal is, so all core marked numerals have the internal structures of figure 2. Okay, so irrespective of whether they have a classifier like ta, or a measure word like bowl or bottle or box, irrespective of that, they have the internal structure of 2. So core, yeah, that is what I have, and I propose. And whereas reduplication, yeah, reduplication just retains whatever. Reduplication doesn't disturb the determiner structure that it applies to, right? So it retains, if it applies on classifiers, it retains this determiner structure in figure 1. If it works on measure phrases, it retains the structure of measure phrases. So it doesn't upset the internal structure, whereas core truly upsets the structure. So core only yields the measure phrase kind of structure. So this is what I think is going on so far. Okay, and so I'll make something out of it. But before going into that, let me tell you something very cool, and that's something you will appreciate, I think, very much. So one of the things that puzzled me really is this 8D, so that 8B is bad, but 8D is good. So this was really perplexing for me. So in the semantics, all I say is core is something that puts together this measure phrase into figure 2 along with the noun phrase. Okay, so this sort of facilitates the modification, okay, of the noun. This is something that facilitates the modification and also adds, a bit of the covariation meaning, okay, along with it, because this is distributive in this for numerals and measure phrases for Bangla. Okay, but what was perplexing for me is that why is suddenly reduplication good for 8D? Okay, and so because in the semantics, I do not make a distinction between these two things actually. Okay, so one of the ideas that I have, which is something that you can comment on, is that my idea was it must be the fact that reduplication fails to apply to measure phrases alone without code, but it applies fine with classifier phrases. I thought must be something to do with the morphological restrictions or spell out, something about morphology. Okay, because at least that is how I have conceptualized that. I have not been able to find semantic justification for that yet. So, okay. So my idea was that, okay, so in figure 1, reduplication can apply to the numeral classifier complex. So the idea is that the classifier head moves into the numeral in morphology, which does not have a semantic effect, right? So it's a morphological operation and forms the cluster numeral classifier complex, so which is a morphological entity. So duto boy. Okay, and reduplication applies on that. And my idea was that reduplication needs to apply to, suffixes, such suffixation structures, because in the language we see that reduplication applies primarily to forms that have been formed with, some sort of suffixation, right? So these adverbs and so let's say gache, and where I think the a is a suffixed form of the locative postposition, and and you have kote and kore, the verbs. There also you have suffixed verb forms formed by some sort of head movement and then reduplicated. So basically reduplication needs some sort of suffixation strategy to have gone on, so head movement probably, and then it realizes that, and moreover it applies to a whole structure. Okay, something that is this kind of structure that once it has moved and some meaning of reduplication is there in the structure already, that requires reduplication to be there. For my case, distributive reduplication to be there. So some semantic operation that will force the reduplication. And you have this num phrase, and that's paired out as duto boy. Okay. Whereas on figure 2, what you have is you do not have a suffixation structure as such. Okay, so you have the measure phrase, which is a modifier. Okay, and so reduplication applying on it doesn't really get its morphological criteria satisfied. Okay, so this was I will tell you what exactly has gone on. So this was my initial position, and then I thought that, okay, Kore glues together the du bati, that is the measure phrase, and dal, the noun. Kore is an element that glues together this modifier and the noun, and while adding a bit about the covariation requirement of distributive numerals. Okay, and but I had no idea as to why reduplication would become good in that case when Kore applied already. Okay, so here is a very nice suggestion that I got, very nice idea that I got from Poroma Sannal at IIT. Okay, so she told me, well, it could be that reduplication cannot Wait, let me capture the thing. So basically, she made a deal about the fact that the measure phrase is a modifier structure, right? So reduplication, if applies to it, uh, okay, yeah, no, I got it. So the thing is that you have the modifier. So since all of you are syntacticians, you will understand this well. So is that the measure phrase, which is a modifier, okay, and the noun phrase, okay, or the noun are in the morphology for their spell out separate entities, okay. So when they are being spelled out, where the reduplication cannot apply on the whole thing, on whole spell out domains, okay. But when whole spell out domains, which is why reduplication applying on just the measure phrase do bati is bad. So do bati, okay. Moreover, this is good for the noun phrase in figure 1 because reduplication doesn't apply on the whole spell out domain, which is the noun phrase, okay, just to the determiner complex that we have formed, duto, okay. So it's not applying to the whole spell out domain, right? Because there are other things in the noun phrase that is not going through reduplication, okay. So naturally, why Kore makes it good is when you glue this dubati with dal, then these two are no longer in the measure structure, no longer separate workplaces, right? So they become part of the same spell out domain thanks to Kore gluing them together. And therefore, reduplication becomes okay as a morphological strategy to apply because it's no longer applying to the whole spell out domain. So I think this is a very nice idea that I got from Poroman. It goes very well with my story
So the
also.
story then is that so the Kore would, so how do the order sequencing of operations go? Because in the syntax you need to have the Kore, right? Before. And reduplication is something that is happening
Morphology.
in the
Spell out, after spell out.
After spell out. So then you have a gluing together structure. So what you have in the syntax is dubati Kore. And
dubati Kore dal, yes, yeah.
Yes. And because of Kore, dubati becomes reduplicatable. That's the argument.
Yes.
And so what does Kore do exactly? I mean, how does it make it? Because it creates basically an extra. I mean, why is Kore different from the N? Because in the N also we are looking if the spell out domain is the phrase in your structure here.
Oh, okay. You're saying that this is if this is N or let's say NP, okay. Suppose this is NP. Okay. So classifier phrase and NP were coming together. Okay. But these are modifiers, adjunction. Okay. So reduplication is not happy with that kind of structure. So what Kore does is removing sort of the adjunction and creates a selectional structure. So it says, I take both the measure phrase and the noun phrase and yield a distributive
so it basically yields an argument structure like
yes.
So the party then becomes an argument of
yes. So basic I believe it creates something like the true. Something like the figure 1, so that reduplication is only applying to a part of that structure. So first of all, the whole thing, the noun phrase cannot spell out parts of it, right, morphologically. And the whole thing, the whole noun, Kore marked noun phrase has to be spelled out at one go. And then I suppose that is the idea that I got that.
It's a one way possible, spell out is to the complement domain, right? So
uh,
if one, so the Kore argument works well, then because you get Dubati as a complement of it, that then is an input to morphology, and morphology basically just spells out the entire complement and reduplicates the entire complement. Now, in the numeral phrase structure, the NumPy structure, this is no longer a I mean, it'll be a complement of some higher head.
yeah, so it's a D or something and or Q.
Then your book is also in that complement domain. So then you should get duto boy.
Yes, yeah.
Right, which you don't get. So you get what is the structure that we get in Bangla?
Duto. Duto boi.
So we would want the numeral to be, actually we would want then the NumP to be in a complement relation, or basically in the spell out domain, unless so we have, if we have, I mean, I think technologically you can do it, because if you say that the categorizer N, so if you have more articulated structure in your NumP, you could get the fact that, I mean, I think you can get these facts, but not speaking out. I mean, you have to make it quite precise.
Explicit.
And precise as to, because this is arguing for a certain structure. This intuition is arguing for a certain specific realization of the classifier structure, actually. Because adjunction, Ishani, if you take, if that's an instance of pair merge, then those structures are typically in an unlabeled relation. That is, they are not. So I think you should actually explore more on the classifier structure once you've got the intuition on the measure structure. And I actually sort of agree with you that the Kore does something like which produces like a complement structure. So I think the issue is not adjunction and modification.
I see.
I think it has got to do with the way that we analyze what is happening in the classifier structure phrase, where clearly this the book is not in the complement. It's not in the. It's the classifier structure which spells out, and which is why it fully reduplicates. And when you in the Dubati, Dal structure is not possible because Dal does not have that relation. I think you should look at it, because I think it'll be nice if you can do it, because it's a. I mean, the one story here with the new NumPy structure I've always felt is that even though we'd like to say that the classifier is the one, is the noun or the noun phrase, that it's nouns that are classified. Because it's the denotation of the noun in classifier languages that chooses the classifier, not an NP. But the way the syntactic structures we build to be able to allow the classifier to come together with the numeral, give you the opposite relation. You are saying that a numeral quantifier selects.
Yes. So there is this debate, right? That whether the classifier selects the numeral or the noun, or the noun selects for the classifier.
Yeah. So I think
right. So there's
that debate. Is the way I think that your intuition here, your and Parama's intuition and measure structure should take us back there. We can think more about it, but I think that might be an advance to choose. So the syntax, I think the problem has come is that it's come from the semantics, but not from the syntax of what selects what. So like a more articulated structure like the Borges structure might be perhaps useful here.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
It's not a deviation.
no. So yeah, also, I mean, there is an additional fact here is because, I mean, originally I thought, I mean, the reason is there is what you were saying. So let's say one kind of way of looking at it is, so instead of what I have in figure 1, right, that then there is a num head that takes the classifier phrase as complement and projects a num phrase. Okay, there's another way of looking at it, which is that the classifier phrase takes a num as its complement and projects a further classifier phrase, right? So, so then in that case, the num becomes the complement of it. So it depends on the what kind of meaning you want to give to your number.
Right.
So yeah, so I guess if that kind of structure works out, if we have a very plain meaning of a number and not a very pronounced meaning which takes the classifier as its complement, it depends. These, of course, these are not on air, right? So yeah, and so I guess what you are saying is if the complement domain is spelled out, and yeah, something like that. And so in that case, we have to form a complement structure for the reduplication to apply in after spell out. So that the complement domain is spelled out and it's reduplicated. Okay, so that's the kind of thing that you're saying, and you're saying that a pronoun structure for these phrases might help in determining this variation of the application of reduplication. Yeah. Okay.
Ishani, I just wanted to ask about a different structure, which is something that we use a lot, which is do duto hoi, do duto tinte. Yeah. So in that case, you posited two structures, right? One with the numpy projecting and one with the classifier. So then in that case, would the classifier projecting be more favorable? If it's do duto.
I don't know, because in that case, what we are seeing is an emphatic reduplication on the number. Right. So instead of the number classifier complex, a whole number classifier complex getting reduplicated, so there's a head movement from classifier to number here, Borer style, and because you have to make them into one constituent, because you have all sorts of structures where these appear away from the noun. Right. So this syntax would not give you those linear strings. So you have to put them together somehow in syntax. And so, yeah, so I guess reduplication would then apply to, yes, that is a further question, that where would you put your reduplication in that case, so that only the number gets reduplicated and excluding the classifier. Yeah.
Ishani.
Wait. Yes.
So about the data, like in 8A and 8, so 8B is okay in Assamese, and we use this Dupati Dali is okay, like we use this one, but Dupati Kori Dali is kind of ungrammatical and odd in Assamese. Yeah.
So there's something. Oh, so then there's further variation for to be studied, right? What is happening in that case? So you cannot. If that is the case, then Assamese is showing the opposite of Bangla. Yeah. Okay. So this is what I have. Okay. I would want you to explore this kind of variation in terms of the measure words and classifiers, and whether using one strategy or combination of both strategies makes any difference or not, because yeah, I guess there's a lot of story in here. Okay. Okay, so let me, from that, whatever I told you, let me go to something that has been discussed for German, English, Romance languages, etc. In terms of not such variation exactly, but variation within forms of distributive numerals. So first of all, let me tell you a new term, which is distance distributive elements. So these are these are different name for distributive numerals or things like that. Okay, so nominal or adverbial distributive items that can be linearly separated from their antecedents. Okay, so what we saw from the plural antecedent, the distributive numeral is set apart, can be set apart by intervening constituents, right? And this is not only numerals, but adjectives, adverbs, all sorts of things. Okay. Now, one typological observation that was made by Malte Zimmermann is that there were two kinds of distance distributive elements. So one, those that can occur as determiners, so English each, etc. And German je der, which is, I guess, each, and those that cannot occur as determiners, which is German jeweils. Okay, so jeweils precedes the numeral indefinite, right? So jeweils two books is the distributive form. Okay, and this jeweils cannot occur like each, so it cannot be jeweils books. It cannot occur as a determiner, right? So then Zimmermann discusses the internal structure of jeweils, nominal and adverbial jeweils, in detail. So in his thesis, it's a very nicely written thesis, and a lot of detail, a lot of cross-linguistic variation, though mostly European languages and a bit about from Japanese. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it's a very nicely written work, and you can have a look at it if you're curious. So he observes that the determiner type, this is the important one, can only yield participant distributive readings, whereas the non-determiner type can yield either participant or occasion distributive readings. This is somewhat like what we saw for reduplication and Kore forms, okay, for Bangla and even Malayalam. Okay, and so I think what Zimmermann observes for the languages that he has studied in his thesis actually can be extended to patterns that we observed above for the difference between reduplicated and Kore mark forms. Okay, and I think one can comfortably say that the reduplicated form is probably retains a determiner kind of structure, and the numeral suffixed with Kore is not a modification structure. Okay. Now, further on top of Zimmermann's generalization, which is a typological generalization, okay, Champollion further, in his studies, further observes that whether or not a distance distributive element, that is these things that we are studying, numerals, let's say, needs a linguistic antecedent for its licensing, is correlated with its ability to distribute over non-atomic parts of its licensor. So this is more of a theoretical point that he builds later on. Importantly for my purposes here, is that he observes that only those that are compatible with non-atomic distributivity are the ones that distribute over salient occasion, that is Telugu kind of cases. Moreover, these are non-determiner type distributive elements. Okay, so the generalization here is the non-determiner type, that is the jeweils type, for German jeweils type, or let me say the Kore type strategy of forming numerals these distributive numerals are good with occasion distributivity, salient occasion distributivity. Moreover, they are good also with non-atomic distributivity, right? So distribution over subpluralities, not just atoms. Okay. And whereas the determiner types, by implication, determiner types, it is largely observed so far without exception that non-determiner types, that is the each type or the yeder type and possibly the reduplication type for the languages that we are looking at here, are actually incompatible with salient occasion distribution and also non-atomic distributivity. So, we sort of, if we try to extend these implications, we will see that the reduplicated numeral would not be able to distribute over non-atomic parts, whereas core would be able to. And I have already shown you that core can, in the previous handout, that core can distribute over non-atomic parts. So I'm not very clear if 10a actually holds, that is, whether reduplicated forms are actually bad for in Bangla to do non-atomic distributivity. So I have this example. So I do not have very strong judgments here. I have very vague sort of judgments here. So I won't really build my theory based on this, but nonetheless I'll tell you what it is. So 11a is the girls were standing around each tree in groups of 5, right? 11a, and then B, so they were divided into groups of 5, which each of those groups are circling one tree. Okay. ওদের কাছে দুটো দুটো প্ল্যাকার্ড ছিল. Okay. So yeah, what it should be, the idea is duto duto would not be able to do this kind of distribution, where oder here is not divided into each girl, but each group of girl, group containing 5 girls. Okay, so the idea is duto duto will not comfortably do this kind of distribution. Okay, whereas duto core would do it comfortably. There's no doubt that duto core is the best form to use in any case in Bangla, but I cannot be very confident here that whether duto duto is indeed worse or not. As far as my intuitions go, this is not something I use, duto duto. But yeah, we'll have to see. So this is something that's there to think about. I hope, for example, what Palu found for Malayalam, whether Malayalam shows any clear distinction in such cases or not. Okay, so this is something to explore in other languages. So whether there is a difference between the forms in case of non-atomic distribution. Okay, or I mean, you can try the same for Hindi. I don't know. Okay. So the interesting fact, which all of you should check with your languages, is 12. Okay. So this is a very strong, sharp distinction. When we distribute over mass nouns, okay. So 12a, we only like, for Bangla, we only like core. We absolutely hate. Even I have very strong judgments here. I'm saying even I, because all my judgments on these things have really have become diffused. But yeah, so even I see the terrible contrast between these two, that you can say Mati 5 taka kore. That is really bad to say Mati 5 taka 5 taka. So try to form these sentences in your languages and see whether you see a distinction between the two forms, or two, or how many ever forms you have. Okay, So because here what we see is that so soil is a mass noun, Mati. Okay. So again, you do not have this is not made of definite atoms or only atoms, depending on the theory you want to go by. If you want to go with hierarchy, it's made of atoms and non-atoms. Okay. Or it's made of atoms too, except for it's like we don't know how far down the structure of the plural lattice we have to go to find the atoms of. We know that there are some atoms conceptually, but we don't know exactly up to what we have to go to find those atoms, and maybe that point is contextually determined. Okay, so the various kinds of conceptualizations of the plural, the structure of the mass nouns, okay, the denotation of the mass nouns. Okay, so suppose mass nouns are formed, contain both atoms and non-atoms, okay, or non-atoms, and then what do you mean by Mati 5 taka kore? Well, you'll have to imagine a situation in which you get the contextually determined units. Suppose I am sitting next to Ganges, okay, and I have collected one pile of soil, and Ganga Mati is in high demand for various purposes. And so, and I have divided that pile of soil into smaller dumplings, and I'm selling them. And you come to me and ask how are these priced, and I say Mati 5 taka kore. So there, I mean the small dumplings that I have made, I'm selling them. Each of them cost 5 rupees. Okay, each of those dumplings, right? So there's a contextually determined unit, okay, which Kore here is distributing over. Okay, the distributive predicate we have 5 taka Kore is distributing over. Okay, whereas saying 5 taka is bad. However, an interesting fact here is if I take account plural, 13, pool gulo, pool is not Mati. So because you have units of pool, flower, individuated units of pool, and which already come individuated, right? You don't have to do it contextually. Although you can do it contextually too, but even if you don't do it, you have an individuation of individual flower. So, and you form a plurality out of it, so you get supposedly, a collection of atoms very easily. When you do that, it's still bad to say pulgulo 5 taka, but it is true that there is a difference between 12B and 13. So Mati 5 taka is really bad. Pulgulo 5 taka is, if I'm in a good mood, I might, pass it. Yeah, okay, so yeah, so it's not that bad. So anyway, what it boils down to is that distribution over mass domains, okay, requires again some sort of non-atomic salient, non-atomic distribution over salient non-atomic units of the noun that we are distributing over. Okay, it seems that this is something that Kore can do for Bangla, okay, but reduplication cannot do, right? But when you form a count plural like pulgulo or boigulo, it's a little bit better. Okay, so and since this is a little bit better, and at least it doesn't seem like really good. I mean, 13 is still bad. Okay, it's just comparatively better than 12B. So I think it's more than it's not just whether core can distribute over non-atomic units, and reduplication cannot distribute over non-atomic units or not. It is also about whether core can be used as a predicate or not, right? And whether reduplication can occur as a predicate, reduplicated forms can occur as a predicate or not. I think so. I think this also goes back to the difference between the two kinds of strategies that we are using inside the numeral, right? Whether this reduplicated numeral, is it good as a predicate? Well, probably not. That is why it is bad in the predicate positions. These are 12 and 13 are examples where this numeral is a measure phases, because taka is a measure word. Yeah, it's so it's sort of it needs to occur as a predicate, and here in the predicate position, reduplication is not doing so well, as opposed to core, which is totally cool as a predicate. It does form a predicate, something like that. Okay, so I think this is more this data actually is in keeping with whatever we are seeing. We have seen so far that indeed there is these are two different kinds of structures for the two different kinds of internal structure, two different kinds of semantics. Okay. And so definitely think about for Hindi, for Assamese, do think about which form will you use in this case among the available forms. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And here I have, okay, so the next little bit I have is something that I already told you in the last class while discussing one of Aisha's questions, is that there is what does core do in general in the language outside these numerals? Well, it forms activity predicates like 14a, bagan kora, lekha pora kora, to study, and boro kora, bring up. So 14a core incorporates noun, a predicate, nominal predicate. 14b, it's incorporating an adjectival predicate, right? So it can work with all sorts of properties and form a predicate. Okay. Well, and there are it can also form a whole range of adverbial modifiers, especially secondary predicates. So here, these are the examples that I already told you in the last class. So the vase broke into 3 pieces, and etc. And so this is these adverbial modifiers or secondary predicates further show a sensitivity towards the presence of the causer or doer. So and here too, if you want to form a passive, 14 of the examples in 14, you have to add "be" on core, right? So to core cannot go with without a causer or a doer, okay, an agent. Whereas if it is not there, in case of adverbials, it cannot be used at all. Okay, and so this holds for both resultatives or other manner modifiers. Okay, like 16. Okay, right. So, however, since I've already told you 15, so I don't want to discuss that. I just want to quickly tell you that the numerals do not have this sensitivity. So 17, প্রত্যেকবার দুটো করে ফুলদানি ভেঙে গেছে. Here ভেঙে গেছে, the same anti-causative, which was bad for the resultative in 15. 17 doesn't have any problem. So even though there's a code, it's cool with anti-causative, and that shows that new core inside the nominal, the numeral is does not retain its properties when it's working inside the nominal. Okay. Okay. Yeah, there's a further distinction is that in the adverb for the adverbials and secondary predicates, they core marked forms are bad with stativity, stative predicates. So Ritu oi ঘরটায় সুন্দর করে আছে. In the translation that would translation of ache, which would mean she is in that room. Okay, সুন্দর করে is really bad. Okay, that সুন্দর করে beautifully cannot modify this kind of stative predication. Okay, if it is the interpretation of staying in that or living, so roeche kind of interpretation, then it will be good. But if it is the existential is in that room, then beautifully or Sundar Kore cannot come here. So it's bad with statives. Whereas there's no problem with statives and the Kore marked distributive numerals as we see in 18. So table gulor upor duto kore fuldani ache. There are two vases each on the tables. So this is no problem. Stative predicate of ache. Numerals, no problem. So basically, the point is that core inside the numerals does not retain, sensitivity towards the nature of the eventualities. Okay, for Bangla at least. Okay, it doesn't. Whereas in its other uses outside the nominal domain, it does retain its sensitivity towards the nature of eventualities. So it's bad with statives. It's bad with anticausatives, so without agents, without causers. Okay, so we cannot really exactly use whatever core is doing in the verbal domain in the nominal domain. That is, this data is to come up with that sort of confusion that yes, it's true that we have a general predicate formation strategy in the language in the verbal domain, and we are extending that same strategy in the nominal domain. Yet these two cores have different properties. One is sensitive to the nature of eventuality, the other it's describing, and the other is not sensitive to the nature of eventuality, it's describing. Okay. The one inside the numeral is not sensitive. Okay. Yeah, so this is, I've already told you this, is that my current position, the last point is that core takes a measure phrase and glues it together with the noun phrase while adding the requirement covariation as part of its meaning contribution, right? So it's put the two things together somehow, okay, by meaning. Okay, and as I already made it clear, the reduplication facts I have not clearly made sense of, so I will not say anything about that. I'll need to work on that. So any kind of suggestion you have, please tell me. Also, I do want you to check out what kind of facts you have for 6, 7, 8, or more importantly for 12 and 13. Because these are really telling. First of all, these are easy data. These are not the usual distributive numeral sentences with a lot of context, tricky meaning. These are small things you can have clear judgments on. Yeah. So you can think about that. And also, it would be useful to see whether the strategies that you're using to form the distributive numerals, whether they are used elsewhere in the language and what kind of work they are doing in those places. Okay, that's something useful to see. Before moving on, what further puzzles me about reduplication? So what do I say in 2.1? Basically, what I told Aisha in the last class is that so here we have core, which forms predicates incorporating properties, like nouns, adjectives, numeral, the measure phrase is also a kind of a property. And so it can also incorporate that, okay? And so no problem. It's comfortably used. So it's used to form matrix predicates, secondary predicates, adverbials, and now it's being used to form adjectival things, okay, inside the numeral. Okay. So what puzzles me about reduplication, this is a fact that I do not have here because I've not made anything out of it. So is that reduplication also can be used to form secondary predicates. For example, to form depictives. So for example, I drank the tea hot. So I will say আমি চাটা গরম গরম খেয়েছি. Right? So this গরম গরম is depictive, secondary predicate. So it's not really the case that reduplication cannot work on predication. So, so this is why it's confused. It's puzzling me even further that what is this sensitivity to reduplication, or this bar on reduplication that we are seeing here in various cases. Okay, so that's something I wanted to point out, that it's not, reduplication is actually used in several cases of secondary predicate formation, in Bangla at least. Yeah. So with that, I want to tell you a little bit about the adverbial, or what I call the productional numerals, because I told you right on the first day that there are adnominal ones, there are adverbial ones, but I didn't really give any example of adverbial ones beyond the first one. So I have them here a bit, but I won't read them out. I will just tell you what we see. Basically, the distribution is that the adverbial numerals, that is the most complex form, so dujon dujon kore or duto duto kore, this form, so reduplication plus kore. Okay, for Bangla it follows a plural, so a definite or an indefinite plural. Okay, so in 19 we have right after the bell rang, they jumped into the water in twos, so ঘন্টা পড়ার পর ওরা দুজন দুজন করে জলে ঝাঁপ দিল. So ওরা দুজন দুজন করে, this form is the দুজন দুজন করে is the adverbial form. What are the salient properties of these numerals? First of all, they can do salient occasion distribution, the Telugu kind of thing. I mean, the Telugu, the modified Telugu kind of scenario. Telugu kind of scenario is really extreme. It doesn't talk about, Rahul did not talk about context at all. Whereas if I really at least add a little bit of context without any structure, that's just making the context a bit more salient for the reading more salient in the context. In that case, the adverbial numerals are good. So the temporal distribution is good without an overt licensor, overt or covert structurally present licensor. This is good, temporal or spatial distribution. This is what I showed. And moreover, we can get readings of participant distribution as well. It's not the case that you only get occasion, that is distribution over time or place with these numerals. You can get participant distribution as well. Let me read that out. So 22A, মেয়েরা বইগুলো দুটো দুটো করে পড়েছে. So this says that each of the girls read the books in twos, right? So they read, so one girl read 2 books, another girl read 2 books. That's how the reading is. It's not exactly a reading about in different times they read 2 books, or in different locations they read 2 books. Although those are also available, those kinds of readings, at least the spatial distribution is always available in this space. Yeah, so all 3 kinds are available. So salient occasion and participant. Okay. For adverbial numerals, let me tell you briefly about their distinction from the abdominal ones. First of all, look at 24 for Bangla, which is the abnominal numeral. What does it look like? 24a. So you have this reduplication suffixation form, then the bare nominal, right? Which does not, Bangla is not a number marking language, so doesn't mark plural on numeral indefinites. So here, a plural classifier ra or gulo cannot follow the noun here. So dujon kore mera is not a permissible form, right? Whereas the adverbial one is just the opposite. It has to be plural, indefinite or definite, and then somewhere, and then the numeral, the morphologically augmented numeral form. So mera dujon kore. So ra in to put it simply, one cannot have the plural marker ra gulo, the other must have. Okay. Must have, or it must be a plural form. Okay. And moreover, the adnominal form, the noun may, right, in 24a cannot be separated from the numeral in any way. So this is true for a general indefinite, numeral indefinite anyway. Whereas this mera in 24b can be easily separated from the dujon kore, no problem. Okay, so the definite plural can be associated with the adverbial numeral, is easily linearly separable. Okay. The adnominal, as we have seen, that the adnominal distributive numerals, that is the 24a kind of forms, we have been studying so far, are compatible with static predicates. We already saw that, the 26b, but the adverbial ones, again, have the sensitivity towards the eventuality, right? So something that we saw for the adverbial modifiers or predicates formed, verbal predicates formed with kore, is retained by the adverbial numerals. Okay, that is sensitivity to the nature of the eventuality, whether it's active predicate or static predicate, each time. So that shows up for the adverbial ones, doesn't show up for the adnominal ones. Yeah, so these are 2 examples. 26 and 27 are 2 examples of that. Let me read them. Maybe I should read them out. So 26, last month, in each week, the girls were sick in 2s. I mean, that sounds very bad in English. So because in 2s is the adverbial numeral in English. So গত মাসে বাংলা এক্সাম্পল, প্রত্যেক সপ্তাহে মেয়েরা দুজন করে অসুস্থ ছিল। Okay. It has to be, if you want to make it good, you have to use a non-stative, right? So you have to use become. অসুস্থ হয়ে পড়েছিল or something like that. অসুস্থ হয়েছিল, not was. Okay. Whereas the abdominal one is perfectly fine with ছিল, অসুস্থ ছিল, was very sick. Okay. 27, প্রত্যেক ক্লাসে মেয়েরা দুজন করে হিন্দি জানতো, again terrible. So in each class, the girls knew Hindi in 2s. Doesn't work at all. So this is what it's showing. Whereas the nominal one is perfectly fine. প্রত্যেক ক্লাসে দুজন করে মেয়ে হিন্দি জানতো. Perfectly fine. In each class, 2 girls knew Hindi. Okay. This kind of sensitivity to the eventuality is what we see for the adverbial numerals is also seen with the correctional adverbials, namely time and time, again and again. So bar bar, jaiga, in place after place, something like that. Those are also bad with stative predicates. So let me tell you briefly what I made out of these distributional facts is that the moment there is sensitivity to eventuality, I have to bring events in my semantics. Okay? I mean, I have events in my semantics even for abnominal ones, but the distribution has to be on eventualities, on events. Okay, so this is why these are important facts for making the semantics. That is, I'm saying that the adverbial numerals are actually using distribution over events. Okay, whereas the abnominal ones are doing distribution over individuals. This is why. Why? Because in one case we see sensitivity to the events, in the other case we don't see sensitivity to the nature of the event. So this is how I use them, and this is not the, of course, the end of the story. I mean, I'm sure a lot more can be said by further investigation. Okay, since somebody asked this question in the first class of Aket Kore, let me tell you a bit about Aket Kore. So Aket Kore is also a pluractional adverbial, 1 by 1. Okay, so let's see, I have this small table here that shows how the adverbial numerals that we have been seeing in this section. Okay, mera, dujon, kore, right? The adverbial ones, how they are similar. What is the comparison with Aket Kore? Okay, so the first row is the adverbial numeral. So it is the form numeral and classifier reduplicated and then suffixed with kore. In the second row, we have Aket Kore, which is no classifier, numeral reduplicated, suffixed with kore. So Aket Kore is bad with statives, just like Akjon Kore. It is bad with both of these. Actually, both of these are good with antipositives. So the kind of fuldani dutukro hoye bhenge geche, that kind of sensitivity to the presence of doer we do not see for the pluractional numerals. Okay, the adverbial numerals or with 1 by 1. Okay, the important distinction comes here. Dujon kore or ekta kore, these forms are good with subject and direct object. Okay, so is Aket Kore, but these adverbial numeral forms, dujon kore, ekta kore, are not good with indirect objects, oblique objects at all. Okay? Whereas Aket Kore is very productive. It goes with everything. It goes from direct object to oblique object and to subject. It goes with everything. Very fluid, very fluent and productive. Okay, so that is a major syntactic difference between Akjon Kore and Aket Kore. Moreover, Aket Kore has an obligatory reading of temporal sequencing, right? It has to be one after another, right? So you cannot build felicitous examples using 1 by 1 or Aket Kore, which has all of them doing this activity at the same time. That doesn't go with Aket Kore. Okay? Whereas, as we have already seen above, that the adverbial numerals it's not, temporal sequencing is not obligated. It is one of the readings that it definitely signals, but it's not obligated. You can use it in context where all of them doing something at the same time. And most importantly, the adverbial ones goes with any number. the classifier, the forms with the classifier goes with any number, whereas the form with without the classifier, that is Akak Kore, only is unique to one. There is no Dui Dui Kore, Tui Tui Kore. Right? Okay. So I want to tell you a bit. So again, about how I made sense of these two a little bit is that I have this in the note. Is that similar kind of restriction on the occurrence of the numeral quantifiers we have been observed for Japanese, the split numeral quantifiers. Okay, so it has been observed when you separate the numeral quantifier from the noun, you can only do so with subjects and direct objects. Okay? You cannot do so for indirect objects or oblique objects, the oblique PPs. Okay? And then that led to the proposal that, and there are further properties. Okay, so which I will not go into, further semantic properties. So what it led to is that then for the what we have been calling this adverbial numerals, that is Akjon, Akjon Kore, Dujon, Dujon Kore, that kind of number with the classifier. Okay, for Japanese, the split numeral quantifiers, actually they form sort of predication structure with the noun, with their noun phrase, a modification predication kind of structure with the noun phrase, and whatever sensitivities we are seeing in terms of structures springs from that. So when I distinguished between these two kinds of forms, I used that background literature. So what I said is that the Mera Dujon Dujon Kore is actually, there's a modification structure with the noun phrase Mera, and then further interaction with the event structure. Whereas Akak Kore, which is syntactically very much more general, doesn't have that modification structure, this predication structure, but actually is working like a true adverb, because adverbs are productive, right? It can occur everywhere. So it's not sensitive to the noun phrase that it's working on, but it can occur in various places on the verbal projection, right? So I used a verbal structure for Akak Kore. Adverbial structure for Akak Kore, and which is why I'm a bit hesitant to actually call Mera Dujon Dujon Kore as an adverbial numeral, but I'd rather call them a pluractional numeral because I don't actually give them an adverbial structure. Okay, so yeah, and actually there are more things on the distinction between these things or similarities, etc. And both of them can be comfortably shown to be dealing with distribution over events. Okay, and furthermore, let me tell you that it doesn't end, this uniqueness of morphology with one doesn't end with Akak Kore, right? Because Akak itself is a form that can have classifiers. Okay, and in that usage, so Akak Ta, Akak Jon, all of these things, in that usage, it's very interesting. All I can say. So it behaves, it has distribution or meaning like each. It does have meaning like English different. So different people read different books. So Akak Jon, Akak Ta boi porlo. And it also has used like the indefinite. So some. Okay. So it has a varied meaning, and you could work on this. This is a very interesting thing to look at. And there's of course Ake, which is like Akak Kore, one by one again. So with that, and you do not see this kind of thing with any other numeral. Okay, and let me tell you in passing that what Parkash has noted for Hungarian is that the numeral egg or one in Hungarian can be, they don't differ from morphologically from the other cardinal numerals. That is, one can be reduplicated just like the other numerals. So 1, 1, 2, 2. But the reduplicated form of one or egg differs in terms of its distributional properties. Okay. First of all, the egg or one in Hungarian behaves like the indefinite article. Okay. And so its reduplication actually, according to Farkas, creates a distributive existential, not a numeral, right? There's more than cardinality, there's existential indefinite reading. Okay, and it distributes over things like sometimes, occasionally, always, at several places, which Prakash notes are things that 2, 2 or 3, 3 cannot distribute over. Okay, so she makes a clear distinction between two kinds of distributive or dependent, she calls them dependent indefinites. One is the 1, 1 form, which is the distributive or dependent existential, and the other set is the one that we have been discussing throughout this class, is the dependent numerals or the distributive numerals. Okay. So yeah, one of the things that you can explore is that further into the variation in morphology of one as opposed to the other numbers in language, and whether there are distributional differences or meaning differences even within tracked by the variation in morphology. So yeah, I'll stop here. I've already gone over by 8 minutes. Okay, so I'll stop here, and yeah, you can read this. Very helpful references.
Right, so can we fix a date for our final workshop? Or let me ask on the email because people will be reading, etc. So, but Ishani, for you, what would be a good date? I think people will need 3 or 4 days.
I mean, any
Saturday, how is Saturday?
yeah, this Saturday is good. Yeah.
This Saturday is good. So okay, we'll consult with people and get back to you. Same time, 11.
Yeah.
Huh?
Okay. I mean, I have no problem. It's wherever it's comfortable for everybody.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you very much, Ishani. These were really very, very interesting lectures. Thank you very much. And I think we will continue to work on this in the future. I think this will whetted people's appetites. So here officially ended the lecture series, and we'll see in a couple of months whether we want to continue with this exercise. But meanwhile, let's talk about, you haven't worked at all in SME, so Ishani could, the other Ishani could also. So people will get
No,
back.
I haven't looked at anything other than Bangla. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm because and I'll send the recording to, I guess, Inakshi and all that, and then they'll put it up. Okay. Okay. Bye.
Okay. See you. Thank you. Bye.